They left the twins under a sky the color of old pewter, the green fork sliding slow and sullen beneath them. The bridge stones were slick from a night's mist. Hooves rang hollow as the host crossed in files, banners stirring in a fitful breeze. Behind them, the towers watched with new eyes. A stark direwolf now flew beside the twin towers, gray on white, snapping in time with Frey blue. It was a compromise Caitlin had pressed for. Leave the old sigil flying, to soothe wounded pride and make it clear that not every Frey neck would feel the sword. Add the wolf, to warn all who passed that this crossing no longer belonged to Walder alone. Beneath those banners, a garrison remained. Blackfish Brynden Tully had accepted the Frey bride with the grim resignation of a man shouldering an ill-fitting cloak, and with the sharp, private satisfaction of knowing the match would keep a Tully hand on the river. Now he stood atop the gatehouse beside his new, tight-lipped wife, watching the host ride out. "You look like you're leaving a lover," Tormund said cheerfully, bringing his shaggy Garen up alongside Jon's. His breath puffed white in the cold air. "You grow fond of stone bridges quick, Snow." "I'm thinking of how much blood nearly soaked those stones," Jon said, "and how little stands between us and that fate when we ride into other men's halls." "Bah!" Tormund spat sideways. "You can't live your life worrying about every goat who might stick a knife in your ribs. You'd never have time to eat. Better to worry about things with real teeth." He nodded northward, "Like white dead men and kings in the cold. Or lions with crowns," Jon said. "Lions I can see coming," Tormund replied. "They roar a lot, easy to hear." They rode in a long column that wound across the riverlands like a rough-stitched scar. Stark and Tully banners fluttered together. Mormont bears growled on green, Umber's giants strained at painted chains. Among them moved stranger sigils now. No official devices, only crude marks daubed on rough shields and scraps of cloth. A horned skull, a stylized bear's paw, a tree with roots twisted into knotwork. Free folk signs mingled with northern steel. Some men glanced sidelong at the fur-clad figures among them, hands never far from their hilts. Others had already begun to talk in that quick, sharp way soldiers did, swapping tales and insults with equal ease. Near the center of the line, one walked rather than rode, his massive strides eating the miles. Children of the camp, washerwomen's brats and squires both, gaped up at him with wide eyes when they dared. Above them all, the sky held its breath, heavy with unshed snow. They camped that night in the lee of a low, wooded hill. The kings rode a dark line beyond the outer ring of watchfires. The ground there was hummocked and uneven, half frozen, but the trees offered some shelter from the wind that had begun to knife down from the north. Inside Robb's tent, the air was slightly warmer, thickened by bodies and breath. A brazier glowed in one corner, coals banked low to stretch the wood. Maps lay unfurled over a trestle board, their edges curling where damp had got at them despite every precaution. "The rivers are behind us," Robb said, drawing a finger along the painted line of the trident as it forked and rejoined itself on the parchment. "No more Freys at our backs, at least. Ahead, we have Moat Cailin and every bog that ever tried to swallow a horse hole." "Moat Cailin," Caitlin said softly. "The first men built it when the world was young. Even in ruins, it can stop an army. Remember that when you're tempted to rush." "I'm not tempted," Robb said. "I'm tired. There's a difference." Jon watched the exchange, feeling again that odd stretch in his chest when he looked at his brother now. The boy he'd grown up with and the king he'd become never fully overlapping. The crown on Robb's brow looked more natural tonight than it had a month ago. Blood had a way of aging men very quickly. He reached for one of the smaller maps, the one that showed the neck in more detail. A smear of green and gray between the North and the Southron kingdoms, laced with blue threads. "The Ironborn still hold the moat," he said. "You'll need to pry them out if you want to bring the host home. Unless you mean to march through the bogs like crannogmen." Robb grimaced. "I've no wish to drown half my army in the first mile." "Then we break the moat," Tormund said, tearing at a roasted onion with his teeth. "Or climb over it. Or under. Men are so fond of their walls and castles they forget how many ways there are to deal with a pile of stones. It's less the stones than the arrows they give shelter to, Caitlin said. Your father wrote once that 10 determined men in those towers could hold back 1,000 if the 1,000 were fools. Are we fools? Tormund asked, amused. We'd be bigger fools to charge straight at those walls, Jon replied. He traced the swamplands around the little inked fort. The crannogmen know paths none of us do. Father trusted Howland Reed. If we can find his people, or send a raven north. Already done, Robb said. He tapped a small circle inked near the swamps. I sent word the moment we turned our banners toward home. A rider went ahead at dawn from the twins. If Reed hears, he'll meet us on his own ground. He's no man for courts, but he understands the stakes. Caitlyn's eyes softened briefly at the mention of the quiet Lord of Greywater. He saved your father's life once, she said. Perhaps he'll save yours again in a different way. Robb smiled faintly, then sobered. And the watch? He asked, looking to Jon. Your raven must have reached Castle Black by now, if it didn't find a snowstorm or a hungry hawk first. Jon thought of the dream. The raven's flight over forests and frozen fields, the wall looming at the end of the world. If it got through, he said, Eamon will read your words. Mormont will listen. They won't send men south, they can't, but they'll be ready, or readier than they were. And if it didn't? Caitlin asked. Then we send another, Jon said. And another. Crows are stubborn. So am I. Tormund snorted. Stubborn, he says, as if that covers half of what's wrong with him. He leaned back, the tent poles creaking as his shoulders brushed them. You lot talk and talk. Never seen folk so fond of words. When we see this moat, we'll see the way round it. Until then, this is all piss in the snow. This piss kept you from being shot full of crossbow bolts at the twins, Caitlin said dryly. He grinned. Aye, that was a good piss. Despite herself, Caitlin's mouth twitched. Outside, a wolf howled, long, low, and not unfriendly. Gray wind, picking up ghosts patrol as they circled the camp in overlapping arcs of white and gray. The sound seeped into the tent, wound around their words like smoke. The pack survives, Jon murmured. Robb's eyes met his over the map. If we keep it together, he said. If we don't let old grudges tear it apart before the dead ever get the chance. The neck smelled of rot and old secrets. It wasn't the rank stench of a battlefield, or the sourness of an unwashed camp. It was deeper, older, the perfume of standing water and slow decay, of things growing and dying in the same breath. The air itself seemed thicker, turned to soup by the mists that coiled above every pool and hummock. Moat Cailin rose out of that ghostly landscape like the broken teeth of some enormous, long-dead beast. 3 towers still stood, more or less. Squat, thick, their tops crumbled, their stone black with age and damp. The rest of the fort had long since sunk back into the earth, swallowed by peat and mud. Only the raised causeway of the King's Road still held firm ground, winding up between the towers like a tongue. Iron-borne banners drooped from the ramparts, their krakens dull against salt-stained cloth. Men moved atop the walls, lean, hard shapes against the pallid sky, axes on their belts, reavers' swagger in every line. They've improved the place, Tormund said, eyeing the crude reinforcements the Greyjoys had thrown up. Fresh stakes driven into the mud, rope-lashed palisades where none had stood before, which is to say, they've made it uglier. Robb's jaw tightened as he studied the defenses. Straight assault will be costly, he said. Arrow fire from the towers, mud to swallow any man who steps off the road. We'd be piling corpses just to build a ramp. Then don't go straight, said the man at Jon's side. Howland Reed looked nothing like the lords of the South. He was small and slight, his hair bound back in a simple strip of leather, his clothes a mottled blend of greens and browns that made him fade into the reeds when he wished. Mud streaked his boots and the hems of his cloak, and something like moss clung to his sleeves in places. His eyes, though, were keen. You came, Robb said, relief flickering across his face. "You called?" Reed replied, as if that explained everything. His voice was soft as marsh wind. "Ned's boy, and Ned's boy's bastard." He inclined his head to Jon. "You have your father's look, both of you. It's disconcerting." Jon felt heat rise to his cheeks. "Lord Reed," he said. He had never met the man before, but he had known his name all his life. His father had spoken of Howland only rarely, and always with an odd mixture of fondness and regret. "We're grateful for any help you can give." Reed glanced out at the towers. "The Ironborn are loud," he said. "They stamp and shout. They throw their axes at the trees when they're bored. They think the only danger here is straight up the King's Road. They forget that the Neck has more paths than any man can see." "You have paths we can't," Robb said. "We do," Reed agreed. "My people have walked them since before any king south of the Neck had a word in our tongue. We can bring men close to those towers without their knowing. Not all your host, but enough to crack them." Tormund chuckled. "Little man, big promises." Reed's mouth twitched. "I've seen giants before," he said, glancing at one who loomed in the distance like an oddly shaped hill. "Big things move slowly. Small things slip through cracks." He nodded toward Jon. "I can take 20, maybe 30, through the bogs to the base of that tower." He pointed to the leftmost, its stones slick with green. "Climb their own walls while their eyes are on your banners." Robb considered. "If we attack on the road at the same time, they'll look at what's loudest," Reed said. "They always do." Jon's blood quickened, the way it did before a climb in the Frostfangs, before a raid. "I'll go," he said. "I know something of climbing rotten stone, and I've fought Ironborn before." Robb's eyes flicked to him, then to Tormund. "And you can't let the crow have all the fun," Tormund said, grinning. "Besides, I've never killed a man on a tower that small. Be a new story." Reed's gaze went to Ghost, who crouched in the reeds, white fur beaded with damp. "He'll need to stay," the crannogmen said. "No path I know is wide enough for a wolf like that. Not if we don't want every frog and bird in the Neck screaming alarm." Ghost's ears flattened, as if he understood the slight. "You'll be with me?" Jon murmured, scratching behind his ear. "On the other side of the walls." Ghost blinked, slow and unblinking, and did not argue. The swamp closed around them like a second skin. Cold water seeped through boots and greaves, up to knees and thighs, numbing as it climbed. Reeds whispered. Mud sucked at their feet, reluctant to let them go. Insects hummed in pale, wavering clusters, drawn to the faint phosphorescence of bog lights that drifted over distant pools like ghostly lanterns. "Don't follow those," one of Reed's men muttered when Tormund eyed a particularly bright cluster. The crannogman's face was painted in streaks of green and brown. "They'll have you stepping where the ground isn't." "Ground isn't," Tormund echoed under his breath. "Bloody place." Howland moved like a shadow, his steps sure even where the muck looked identical to every other patch. "Keep to my prince," he said softly. "Step where I step. If the water suddenly goes cold as the wall, stop." "That's reassuring," Jon murmured, but he did as he was told, placing his boots in the shallow eddies Reed's passage left. The water lapped at his thighs, sending little shivers of chill up his spine. His sword was wrapped in oiled cloth and slung across his back. He carried only a dagger loose at his belt, hilt tied to keep it from catching. Above them, the tower loomed, its stones slick with moss and lichen. The line where its foundation met the swamp was indistinct. Roots and mud had crept up over the first courses of stone. Voices drifted down. Ironborn, trading jests in rough accents, their words blurred by height and mist. "Tell me again why we're not just walking up the road and hitting them with the giant?" Tormund whispered. "Feels more honest." "Because I'd like some of us to survive the day," Jon said. He could just make out the faint, distant movement of Stark banners on the causeway, gray shapes in the fog. "Robb will give them something to look at soon enough. We have to be in place when he does." Howland led them to a stretch of the wall where the stone bulged outward, forming a low, sloping buttress half swallowed by muck. "Here," he said. "We dug this out years ago when we first thought of how to take this place from the south. Never needed it till now. Always dig your bolt holes before the fire starts," Tormund said approvingly. They gathered beneath the bulge, pressed close. The stone was slick under Jon's fingers, slime cold and unpleasant. He wiped his hand on his cloak, then tested higher. Here, nearer the dry line, there were cracks and ledges. Small, but enough. Above, a horn blew, a raw, challenging note from the roadside. "That will be your king," Howland murmured, being loud. Almost at once, the voices overhead sharpened. Boots thudded as men rushed to the ramparts facing the causeway. The Ironborn liked nothing better than a stand-up fight, axes in hand, a straight line of stone to defend. "Now," Jon breathed. His heart beat a little faster. "Climb." He went first, fingers finding holds where none seemed to exist. Tormund followed, his muttered curses almost as constant as his breath. Behind them, two of Reed's men moved with eerie ease, their light frames hugging the wall, their mud-camouflaged faces nearly indistinguishable from the stone. The world narrowed to stone and breath and the scrape of leather. Jon's muscles burned. His thighs ached from the cold of the swamp and the strain of lift, plant, pull. Twice his boots slipped, moss skidding under his weight, but his fingers held. Halfway up, a wet clod of something landed near his cheek. He froze, pressing himself flat. Above, an Ironborn guard leaned out, spitting into the swamp. "Look at the bloody fools," the man said, voice thick with amusement. "Marching straight up our throat. We'll gut 'em and send their king's head to pike in a sack." "Should have done that when we took his castle," another replied. "Be less trouble." Castle, Winterfell. Jon swallowed and forced himself not to look toward the north. The memory of gray stone and blue banners burned anyway. The Ironborn turned away, attention drawn by another horn blast. Jon climbed. The top of the tower was a ring of broken teeth. Merlins, some still standing, others crumbled away, jutted around the circumference. Between them, the world fell off into gray, mist over swamp, over causeway, over the distant shape of the Stark host arrayed just out of bowshot. An Ironborn watchman leaned over one of the narrower gaps, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Come on, you milk drinkers," he bellowed down the causeway. "We've axes for all your pretty northern heads." His laughter blew back on the wind. A hand reached up from the shadow below the parapet. For an instant, Jon dangled, fingers gripping the inner edge of the stone. His arms burned. Then he heaved, dragging himself up in a smooth, desperate motion. His boots found purchase on the inner walkway. He rolled, coming up in a crouch. The Ironborn turned, eyes widening, mouth opening on a shout that never fully formed. Jon's dagger sank into his throat. Hot blood washed over his hand. The man's weight collapsed forward. Jon pushed, guiding him down between the merlins. The body slid over the edge and fell silently into the mist, swallowed in an instant. "Ugly views from up here," Tormund muttered as he hauled himself onto the stones. His face was flushed, beard dripping swamp water. "Too much sky. Keep low," Jon said. "We don't want them on the next tower seeing us until it's too late." The inside of the parapet walk was narrow, barely wide enough for two men to pass without jostling. A small wooden door led into the tower proper, its iron hinges streaked with rust, its handle worn. Voices drifted from beyond, Ironborn, laughing at some shared joke, punctuated by the occasional clang of steel on stone as a man sharpened his axe. Jon wiped his dagger on the dead man's cloak, then sheathed it and reached back for Longclaw, unwrapping the oiled cloth. The Valyrian steel looked almost black in the morning light, its ripples catching what little brightness there was. He glanced at Howland's men as they pulled themselves onto the walkway, faces streaked with grime but eyes clear. "Two of you to the western merlins," Jon whispered. "If they sound a horn below, Shoot the first man to reach the stair. Tormund and I will take the door. No crown, but you give orders like one, Tormund murmured. There was no heat in it, only observation. Somebody has to, Jon said. You'll frighten them more on the stairs. Tormund's grin flashed brief and fierce. They moved. The door opened inward with barely a creak. Someone had tended it recently, a smear of grease still clinging to the hinge. Beyond, a spiral stair clung to the inner wall, torches guttering in brackets, their smoke staining the stone. The smell of tar and unwashed men thickened. Jon went first, Longclaw angled low. Half a turn down, he met the first Ironborn. A bearded man in a patched leather coat, axe across his shoulder. The man's eyes widened. For half a heartbeat he froze. The sight of fur and mail and a sword where no sword should be breaking his sense of the world. Then he shouted. The cry was cut off when Longclaw took him across the chest, driving him back into the man behind, who cursed, stumbled, and went down in a tangle of limbs. Tormund barreled into them both, axe swinging, laughter booming. Wake up, Krakenspawn. The wildling roared. You've got guests. Below, others shouted back, alarm rising. From outside came the muffled thump of something heavy, Robb's probing attack on the causeway, pressing just close enough to sting, not close enough yet to break. Arrows sang. Men yelled. The Ironborn on this tower had thought it all just good sport. Now they heard something else beneath it, the note of danger. Too late. The stair was a choke point, a stone throat where every sound was amplified and every step could be death. Jon moved downward, blade a dark arc in the close air. An Ironborn lunged at him, teeth bared, salt-sour breath hot against Jon's face. Their blades met with a sharp ring, the force of it jarring up Jon's arms. The man snarled and shoved, trying to bull past. Jon yielded a half step, then twisted, letting the man's weight carry him forward. Longclaw turned, bit into exposed flank as the Ironborn overreached. The man grunted, eyes wide, then slid down the wall, leaving a smear behind. Behind Jon, Tormund laughed, a rough, delighted sound, as he used the butt of his axe to crack another reaver under the chin. Too tight for a good swing, he complained. Next time I'll tear the bloody tower down with my hands first. We need it standing, Jon panted. For now. For now, Tormund agreed cheerfully, and shoved a third man back into the darkness below. Steel clanged. Sparks flew when blade slid along blade. The stair's curve meant that no one could see more than a few steps ahead. Each turn was a blind corner. Twice, arrows hissed up at them, shot from somewhere below, clattering off stone when they struck and skittering down the steps. One nicked Jon's cloak. Another grazed Tormund's arm, opening a thin line of red that only made the wildling grin wider. Come on, Kraken sons, he roared. You shout so much about what is dead may never die, but you squeal like stuck pigs easily enough. Be quiet, Jon snapped. Then, unable to help himself, added, at least shout smaller. Tormund wheezed laughter. They hit a knot of Ironborn halfway down, where the stair opened briefly onto a slightly wider landing. Half a dozen men had gathered there, axes and short swords arrayed, forming a rough shield wall across the space. Behind them, Jon glimpsed a dim, low-ceiling chamber with barrels stacked against the walls and a rough-hewn table laden with salted fish and stale bread. Their ready room, close enough to the ramparts to respond to a cry. Now this, Tormund said, is more like it. They crashed into the line. The first Ironborn met Jon's blade with his own, muscles corded, eyes burning with the fierce joy reavers found in battle. Jon ducked a swing, felt it take a lock of his hair instead of his skull, then came up under the man's guard, driving his pommel into his jaw. Bone crunched. The man's head snapped back. Longclaw followed, slicing across his exposed throat. To Jon's right, Tormund simply shouldered into his opposite, using his weight and the tight quarters to smash the man back into the one behind him. The two toppled, tangled, and the wildling's axe came down twice in short, brutal chops. Break! Someone shouted in the Ironborn tongue. Break formation. They did, but in the wrong direction. Backward, each man suddenly less eager to be the first to stand against the Valyrian steel and the mad giant of a man with the blazing eyes. One tried to dart down a side passage. A crannogmen arrow took him in the neck from the stair above. Yield! Jon called over the noise, breath ragged. Throw down your weapons and you live to see the sea again. For a moment, all he heard was panting, the drip of blood on stone. Then one man let his axe fall with a clatter. Another followed. The third spat on the floor, eyes burning, but his fingers were trembling on the haft of his weapon. You'll kill us anyway, the spitter snarled. Not if you stop trying to gut us, Tormund said. We've enough dead for the day. There's more coming tomorrow. The man's grip loosened. His axe hit the stone beside the others. From the ramparts above, a horn sounded higher, cleaner than the Ironborn's harsh blasts. The note of a northern war horn. Jon's heart jerked. They're on the walls, he said. Then this tower's theirs, Tormund replied. He wiped his axe on a fallen man's cloak and slung it over his shoulder. Come on, Crow. Let's go see how your king's doing with his gate. The gates gave way not with a glorious crash, but with a reluctant groan, as if the old timbers resented being asked to move at all. The iron portcullis rattled up just enough to admit a man hunched over, then stuck, its corroded teeth squealing. It was enough. Northern men surged through the gap, boots slipping in the churned mud of the King's Road as it transitioned into the ruined courtyard beyond. Arrows hissed from the remaining towers, but fewer now. Many archers lay dead on their own battlements, fallen to crannogmen shafts and blades in the back. Robb entered in the second wave, not the first. He had listened to counsel on that, at least. But once inside the walls, he was nothing if not visible. The crown bright against his wind-tangled hair, cloak snapping behind him. Grey wind was at his side, fur spattered with mud and blood, eyes alight. Push them, Robb shouted. Drive them back from the gate. They have nowhere to run but the bogs. The Ironborn, seeing the northern tide pouring into their hard-won holdfast, faltered. Some backed toward the inner stairways, mouths twisted in curses. Others, remembering salt and stone and the promise that what is dead may never die, bared their teeth and charged. Steel rang. Men crashed together in the narrow courtyard, the sound muffled by mist and the sucking pull of wet earth underfoot. A Stark man went down with a kraken axe in his chest. An Ironborn toppled after, Grey Wind's jaws clamped on his arm. From a side door burst Jon and Tormund, trailing a ragged string of disarmed reavers guarded by crannogmen. Jon's hair was plastered to his skull with sweat and swamp water. His face was streaked with grime, his eyes very clear. Longclaw's edge was darkened, but unbroken. Your Grace, he called, herding his prisoners toward the nearest wall. This tower's yours. Robb spared him a look, a blink of surprised relief, a nod, and returned his attention to the fight before him. Ghost appeared a heartbeat later, bursting from the reeds where he'd waited at Jon's earlier gesture. The dire wolf plunged into the melee with savage joy, attacking any man who smelled of sea salt and kraken. Tormund waded into the fray with a bellow, axe clearing space around him. This is more like it, he exulted. Mud, blood, and too many fools in too small a yard. Watch your toes, boys. The Ironborn resistance, fierce as it was, could not withstand pressure from both gate and tower. With every passing heartbeat, more Northerners spilled into the moat. More reavers fell or were forced back. At the far end of the courtyard, near the stump of what had once been a central keep, a horn blew, a single wavering note. An older man in rust-splotched mail, gray in his beard, held it. His face was cut in several places, blood streaking his brow. Enough, he rasped, voice ragged but loud. Enough, throw them down. He let his axe fall first, hitting the mud with a dull thump. Some Ironborn ignored him, frenzied, eyes gone glassy with battle lust. They died where they stood, cut down by northern steel or dragged under by wolves. Others seized on the permission like men offered a plank in a storm. Their weapons dropped, their shoulders sagged. One young reaver, no beard yet, salt-crusted hair hanging in his eyes, glared at Jon as he relinquished his sword. "You'll kill us anyway," he said. "Starks and krakens don't make terms. We make ours," Jon said. "Whether your lord's honor theirs is another matter." He looked to Robb. The king stood in the churned mud, chest heaving, sword lowered. His gaze swept the yard. The dead, the wounded, the living who might yet be either. He seemed, for a heartbeat, immeasurably tired. "Those who threw down their weapons when bidden live," he said. "Those who kept swinging after the horn fell die. We have no food to waste on men who would rather feed the crows. Those who live go to the wall. Let them freeze, they're serving the realm they tried to pillage." A murmur went through the northern ranks. Approval, relief, the restless itch of bloodlust seeking outlet and being denied. Robb's eyes dared anyone to argue. No one did. The hall of Moat Cailin had not sheltered true lordship in centuries. Its roof had fallen in long ago, leaving a jagged mouth through which damp and sky poured in equal measure. Moss grew on the fallen stones. A tree had seated itself in a corner, its roots pushing between ancient flagstones, its thin branches scraping at the open air. Someone had contrived a hearth of sorts out of broken masonry and scraps of scavenged iron. A fire burned there now, smoke curling up past the missing rafters. Its heat barely pushed back the chill, but it gave light enough to see by. Robb sat on a half-collapsed block that might once have been part of a throne dais, his cloak wrapped tight, a cup in hand. The crown on his brow was smeared with mud where someone's bloody hand had brushed it during the fighting. He hadn't bothered to clean it. Jon sat opposite, Ghost's flank pressed against his boots. The direwolf's fur was still damp, but his eyes were closed, his breathing even. Grey Wind lay near Robb, head on his paws, one ear twitching whenever someone shifted. Tormund had sprawled with his back against a fallen stone, legs splayed, horn resting on his stomach. He drank like a man who knew how quickly provisions vanished on campaign, but who also believed that the gods would send more if the stories were good enough. Howland Reed perched on a broken pillar stub, as at home as if he were on a log in his own bog. His clothes were still damp. He didn't seem to notice. "You see," Tormund said, waving his horn broadly enough that a few drops spattered the floor. "Little tower, big story. Tormund Giantsbane takes a fort with 2 hands and a crow. That's one I'll tell around fires. 2 hands, 3 crannogmen, and a boy with a sword that cost more than your entire wardrobe," Jon said. Tormund snorted. "Details." Robb smiled faintly into his cup, then sobered. "The Ironborn you spared won't thank you," he said to Jon. "They won't see it as mercy. Only weakness." "I didn't spare them for thanks," Jon said. "Night's Watch is bleeding men everywhere. If a few reavers learn what it is to stand a wall instead of raid one, that's more than they'd have given us." Reed nodded slowly. "Some of them might even learn to respect the black. Stranger things have happened in my swamps. And some will try to climb back off the wall the first chance they get," Tormund said. "Men are men. You can't beat sense into them. It just rattles around and falls out somewhere else." Robb rubbed at his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. "I keep thinking of Theon," he said quietly. "If he were here, would I send him too? Up there with the rest? Or would I?" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. They all knew the stories, brought south by desperate men seeking any king who would listen. Winterfell burned, boys hung, Greyjoy banners briefly flown over northern stone before another. Darker flayed man banners supplanted them. Theon taken, Theon broken, Ramsay Snow, Ramsay Bolton now, if Roose spoke true, playing his own bloody games. "You'll have to decide that when the time comes," Caitlyn's voice said from the shadows. They turned. She had entered without any of them noticing, her steps light over the uneven floor. The firelight picked out tired lines in her face, the smudges beneath her eyes. She changed her gown for a heavy, plain wool, more suited to marching. She looked like a woman who had shed a great deal in a very short time and did not yet know what she was without it. For now, she continued, coming fully into the circle of light, you did what you needed to do. The moat is yours. The way north is open. That is enough. Is it? Robb asked. Every time we take something back, I think of what's still lost. That's what kings do, she said gently. Count losses along with gains. And bastards, Tormund interjected. What do? Crow, count ghosts? Jon looked at the fire. I count how many dead men it took to make this night possible, he said. And how many more it'll take to see the next. Silence fell, but it was not entirely heavy. Outside, the mist curled closer, drawn by the flicker of flame and the murmur of men. Somewhere in the half-ruined hall, a crannogman sang under his breath in a language older than the King's Road, the song weaving between stones like water. Beyond Moat Cailin, the land changed. The sluggish, treacherous waters of the neck gave way to firmer earth, the King's Road climbing onto higher ground. The air grew crisper, the damp heaviness lifting. Trees thickened along the verges, pines and firs and hardy oaks, their branches whispering together in a language Jon had known as a boy in Winterfell's godswood. The men changed with the land. Backs straightened almost unconsciously, shoulders settling as boots found steadier purchase. Faces that had been wary in the bog mist relaxed a fraction. This was home soil, even if it was still miles from any bannered hall. Feels different, Tormund remarked, sniffing the air. Smells of snow and old stories. Less like rotten water. That's the north, Jon said. It gets into your bones if you let it. Into your heads too, I'd say, Tormund replied cheerfully. Only men who grow up in this cold would think it a good idea to build a wall out of ice and then live on the wrong side of it. Robb rode just ahead, eyes on the line of the road where it dipped and rose. He had set scouts out, northern riders who knew the land, crannogmen slipping through the reeds that still clung to low-lying ground, wildlings who moved like ghosts when they wished. No more would they ride blind into any man's country. Winterfell in 5 days, if the gods are kind, he said when Jon drew alongside. For if we push, the men could do 4, Jon said. But the horses. I know, Robb sighed. I want to see the walls again, even blackened. I want to walk the yard where you and I bloodied each other's noses. But I don't want to limp there with half my strength in bandages. Jon pictured Winterfell as he had last seen it. Smoke-stained, walls cracked, the great hall's doors scorched. The thought of those familiar stones marred made his stomach turn. Whatever it is now, it's not what we knew, he said. Be ready for that. Robb's jaw tightened. I don't know what's worse, he said quietly. The thought of seeing it burned, or the thought of someone else sitting in Father's chair as if it were his by right. He shook his head, as if to clear it. You'll ride in with me, whatever we find. I want them to see you at my side. They'll call me Oathbreaker, Jon said. Turn cloak. They'll call you a Stark, Robb said. Whatever name you wear. And if they don't, they can argue with the king. Behind them, a burst of laughter went up. Jon glanced back to see Tormund at the center of a small knot of men, gesturing wildly with his hands as he told some story which, from the expressions on the faces around him, was either filthy, mad, or both. Possibly both. Odd sight, Robb observed. Giantsbane, trading japes with Mormont men. That's what you wanted, Jon said. A pack, not just a scattered lot of lone wolves. And lone bears and mad giants and crannog toads, Robb said. Father would say I've gathered a strange pack. Father marched south with a man for every corner of the north, Jon said. Old gods, new gods, Starks and Karstarks, Manderleys and Umbers. You've just widened the circle. For a moment, Robb's expression softened, the boy in him peeking through. He'd have liked you being so sure of me, he murmured. He'd have liked that we're still alive, Jon said. The rest is words on a wind. The wind picked up as they rode, sharp enough now to sting. It smelt of resin and frost. Somewhere ahead, beyond the next rise, lay the lands that ringed Winterfell. Forests where Jon had hunted, fields where he had watched harvests, villages where he had ridden through at Ned Stark's side, nodding to small folk who did not quite know what to make of the quiet boy at their lord's stirrup. Home and not. They saw Winterfell at dusk. The King's Road bent around a stand of tall pines and climbed a gentle slope. At the crest, the trees fell away on one side, giving a view across a shallow valley. There, on its low hill, wrapped in its ancient walls, stood the castle that had been more home to Jon than any other place in the world. For a heartbeat, his mind rejected what his eyes told him. The curtain walls were still there, mostly, but in places blackened, stones cracked and spalled by fire. The great tower that had housed the maester's rookery bore a dark smear up one side. The roof had fallen in. The empty sockets of arrow slits stared out like burned eyes. Within the walls, the great hall's roof was half collapsed, beams charred. The smoke that still rose did so in thin, indolent threads, the remnants of old burning, not any current blaze. The godswood's canopy had thinned. One corner of it bore a blackened patch where flame had tried to leap the moat and failed. Jon felt something twist under his ribs. Memory rose unbidden. Winterfell under snow, the courtyard alive with boys sparring, girls gossiping on walls, servants hurrying on errands. The warmth of the hot springs beneath the stone, fog curling along the base of towers on cold mornings. The smell of bread baking, of leather and horse and hearth smoke. All of it overlay now on the sight before him like a ghost, almost more painful than the ruin itself. Beside him, Robb sat very still. His face had gone pale under its windburn. Gray wind whined, a low, uneasy sound, as if he, too, smelt something wrong in the air. Tormund exhaled, long and low. "You lot build fine piles," he said quietly. "Even burned, it looks like it wants to stand. I've seen keeps that fell to ash quicker than a thatch hut." "It wasn't the fire that killed it," Howland Reed murmured. "It was the betrayal." Roose Bolton had spoken, earlier in the day, of Ramsay's victory over the Ironborn who had holed up here, of the flayed man riding in the Grey Wolf's place, however briefly. Jon thought of that now. Ramsay Snow, bastard once, bastard in truth still whatever style he took, strutting through Winterfell's halls, deciding what to burn, what to spare, who to chain. "His banners aren't flying now," Robb said. "Nor Greyjoy's. Who holds it?" "Ramsay stripped it when he rode south to hunt other prey," Bolton had said, pale and calm. "Left only a token force, squatters and cowards. Easy for you to reclaim, your grace, when your road bends that way." Jon did not trust ease. Not in war. Not in men like Roose Bolton. "We sent riders ahead," he said. "Scouts and crannogmen both. No sign of a large garrison. No sign of open banners. Just smoke and a few men in the yards. That's more than enough for a few knives to do their work in the dark," Tormund muttered. "Castles swallow men as easily as marshes do, when the stones are full of shadows." Robb closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. When he spoke, his voice was steady, if raw. "I won't wait," he said. "I won't sit another night out here while strangers sleep under that roof. We go in. Tonight. Carefully. But we go." Caitlin, who had drawn up a little way behind, listened in silence. Her gaze was on the broken towers. Jon wondered what she saw in them. Ned's smile in the yard, Bran climbing walls, Sansa at her sewing, Arya slipping away with a wooden sword. "Then we go in like ghosts," Howland Reed said. "The outer walls have cracks, the postern gates are half rotten. My folk know every inch of those stones. For all you Starks like to pretend we don't slip through them whenever we please." Robb nodded once. "You'll take point then," he said. "Crannogmen first, my best men next. No banners, no horns. Just steel and quiet, until we know who's inside." "And me," Jon said. Robb didn't argue. "And you. And me," Tormund added, grinning. "I want to see this place up close. If I'm to die in a Kneeler castle, might as well be a big one." "You're not dying," Jon said. "Not here." Tormund laughed softly. You don't get to say that, boy, but it's a nice thought. Ghost stood at the ridge's edge, fur ruffled by the wind, nose lifted toward Winterfell. His red eyes reflected the last smear of sunset on the horizon, making them seem to glow. Home, Jon whispered, though the word tasted strange now. Or what's left of it. Robb's hand tightened on his reins. We'll make something of it again, he said. Or we'll die trying. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faintest echo of the hot spring steam, of stone warmed from within. It might have been his imagination. It might have been a promise. Behind them, the host waited in the deepening dark, their fires banked low. Ahead, Winterfell's broken towers cut the sky like the bones of some great, fallen giant. The night to come would decide whether those bones would shelter wolves once more, or be left for the dead to claim when winter finally came in full. Night came down hard and cold. A thin rind of moon floated behind ragged clouds, its light just bright enough to turn the snow to dull silver and the castle walls to looming shadows. Winterfell's outline was both familiar and strange. The same curves of curtain wall and tower Jon knew from boyhood, distorted now by black scoring, by jagged gaps where stone had fallen. They went on foot. No banners, no armor bright enough to catch a stray gleam. Mail was muffled with leather and cloth. Helms left off in favor of soft-brimmed caps and hoods. Swords were piece-bound with wraps that could be cut in a heartbeat. Daggers rode loose at belts. Jon's hand rested on Longclaw's hilt, the Valyrian steel wrapped in dark cloth, its weight a promise under his palm. Howland Reed moved at their head, a low shadow against the snow. Behind him came a knot of crannogmen, painted and silent, their frog spear hands as steady on stone as in marsh. Jon, Robb, and Tormund followed, with a handful of picked northern guards behind them. Men Robb trusted to keep their wits as well as their blades. Ghost and Grey Wind moved ahead, pale and dark, their paws making no sound at all. The air around Winterfell felt different. There was the usual smell of smoke, old mostly, but threaded through with fresher traces from cook fires. The hot springs sent up their familiar ghost breath through cracks in the stone, seeping into the night. But beneath that, Jon's nose caught a taint that did not belong to his memories. Char too deep to be from hearth fires, the faint tang of old blood, of fear soaked into wood and straw. They skirted the King's Road and the main gate, keeping to the cover of low stone fences and broken carts abandoned in the aftermath of siege. The shadow of the first keep reared on their left, square and hunched. The outer wall ahead showed a dark line where mortar had crumbled. Ivy and age had given the stones a rough, climbable face that any Winterfell urchin, or a Stark boy with a taste for heights, had learned to use long ago. Here, Jon murmured. Bran used to slip out this way when old Nan told stories that put fear into him. The stewards never could figure how he gave them the slip. Robb's mouth twitched in the dark. He fell more often than he told us, he said. Tried to hide the bruises from father. Howland Reed laid a palm flat to the wall, fingers spreading, feeling for holds. Good cracks, he whispered. Old builders did not imagine frog-eaters or wolf boys. Up and over, then, Tormund said. Last one in has to share his ale. They climbed. Any other night, Jon might have felt the old thrum of illicit excitement in scaling these stones. As a boy, he'd traced every path the masonry offered, seeking vantage points from which to watch unseen. The yard, the godswood, the hall. Now, the holds under his fingers felt changed. Rougher where fire had cracked them, crumbly where heat had eaten at the mortar. Halfway up, a chunk of stone flaked away under Tormund's hand, skittering down into the snow with a faint crunch. All three men froze. Above, a sentry's silhouette moved along the parapet. A harsh voice muttered something, too indistinct to catch. Footsteps thudded, receding. Jon let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd trapped in his throat. He resumed climbing more carefully. At the top, Reed slipped over the crenellation like a shadow. Jon followed, belly sliding over cold stone, then rolling into a low crouch. The walkway was empty, no guard in immediate sight. The nearest torch bracket held only a stub of blackened wood. Whoever watched this stretch had either gone to warmer ground or been lax. "Ghost," Jon breathed. The dire wolf vaulted the last of the wall in an easy bound, claws scritching softly on the rampart. His nose went sideways, testing the wind from the inner yard. Ears pricked, he looked back at Jon and gave the smallest of nods. Clear. For this moment, at least. One by one, the others hauled themselves up, dropping lightly onto the wall walk. Robb's face was set, jaw clenched hard enough that muscles jumped along it. Tormund grinned like a man who'd just stolen another man's boots. "Feels like being a boy again," the wildling murmured, "sneaking into places we're not wanted." "For you," Jon replied under his breath. "That's any place with a roof." Tormund's eyes gleamed. They slipped down the nearest stair, into Winterfell's broken heart. The courtyard he stepped into was both exactly and nothing like the one in his memory. The shape of it was the same. The broad expanse of packed earth, now pitted and frozen mud, where men had trained and horses had been exercised. The lines of buildings ranged around the perimeter, the armory, the smithy, the old barracks. The wooden gallery that had run along one side was half gone, its supports charred and leaning drunkenly. Snow dusted everything. A thin, uneven veil that did little to hide the injuries. The forge was dark, its chimney blackened by more than soot. The familiar clang of hammer on anvil was only a ghost in Jon's mind. One corner of the yard was piled with rubble where a tower had partly slumped. Stone blocks tumbled like dice. The great hall's wide doors were scorched, iron bands warped by heat. One hung askew on a broken hinge, leaving a gap through which warm light flickered. No guards paced the open space. That unsettled Jon more than the damage did. Winterfell had always had eyes in its yard. Stable boys, stewards, guards on their rounds. Now only the wolves moved openly, white and gray shapes sliding over snow. Ghost's nostrils flared. He veered toward the kitchens, head low. Gray Wind's hackles rose as he sniffed toward the great hall. "There are men here," Jon whispered, "but not many. Ghost would be growling if we were about to walk into a whole garrison." "Or he likes me better than you," Tormund muttered. Reed had gone ahead again, slipping from shadow to shadow. He reappeared by a half-collapsed stairwell, motioning them close. His eyes were bright in his painted face. "Dozens, not hundreds," he murmured. "A handful in the hall, some in the old barracks. One on the wall we saw half asleep. They haven't the discipline to keep proper watch." "Who are they?" Robb breathed. Reed's mouth tightened. "Flayed men on their chests," he said. "But their voices are Umbers, Ryswells, men from smaller houses. Bolton's leavings." Jon felt cold creep under his cloak from within. "Ramses," he said. Reed nodded once. "He took the fiercest south to hunt, left the hangers-on to hold his prize and squeeze what they could from what was left. A few ironborn too stubborn or too broken to run with the rest. There it was, then, proof in stone of what Roose had only hinted at, smoothed into a tale of victory and order. Flayed men in Winterfell's yard." Jon's hand tightened on Longclaw's hilt until his knuckles whitened. Robb's breath steamed in the air, harsh and quick. "We take them," he said, "quietly if we can, loudly if we must. I won't have Bolton colors in my father's yard another heartbeat longer than needed." "What of the small folk?" Caitlyn's voice came from the dark near the stair. She had insisted on joining the vanguard over half a dozen protests. Now she stepped into the stray light from the hall's crack, face pale, jaw set. "If any remain." "There are eyes behind shutters," Reed said. "Faces in cracks. They won't come out until they know who's shouting in their yard." "Then we'll show them," Robb murmured. "Jon, take Ghost and half the men. Circle to the barracks. If those men wake to noise in the hall and pour out into your path, cut them down. If they're sleeping, give them a chance to yield before you spill blood on the same stones where we once sparred." Jon nodded. "And you?" "I'll take the hall," Robb said. "Me, Grey Wind, Tormund, Reed. If there's a man in there sitting where father sat, I want to be the one to pull him off the bench." Tormund bared his teeth. "I like this king of yours," he said to Jon. "He knows where he wants to put his boots." "On the necks of traitors," Robb said. "Where else?" The old barracks smelled of sweat, damp wool, and stale ale. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers. Someone had thrown a half-frozen log on it without much success. Smoke pooled under the low ceiling, blending with the heavier scents. Men lay sprawled on bedrolls in disordered rows. Some had kicked their blankets off. Others were cocooned tight, faces barely visible. Male shirts lay in careless heaps nearby, rust spots blooming along the links. A flayed man badge glimmered dully on one pile, the red and pink of it dirty and scuffed. They'd taken their ease in what they thought was a conquered castle. No one had expected wolves to come padding back through soot and ash. Jon stood just inside the door, Ghost a white shape at his leg. Behind him, half a dozen of Robb's chosen men waited, swords drawn but not yet raised. Daisy Mormont with her hair tied back and a bear on her breast. A Serwyn man whose name Jon didn't know but whose eyes were hard and clear. A tall umber with a split lip. Ghost's lips peeled back, just enough to show teeth. His ears pricked toward one of the nearer pallets. The man there stirred, muttering, rolled over, and froze, eyes going wide as they found a direwolf's gaze inches from his nose. He opened his mouth to shout. Jon's sword was at his throat before the sound could form. "Don't," Jon said very quietly. "Wake them with a scream, and you'll be the first to die." The man swallowed. He was young, stubble patchy on his jaw, a scar along his cheek. His eyes darted past the blade to Jon's face, to the direwolf, to the men behind. "You're Starks," he croaked. "Northern men." "Yes," Jon said. "And you're wearing a flayed man in our hall." The young soldier's gaze flicked to the badge on his discarded mail. Shame, hot and sharp, flashed across his face. "Orders," he whispered. We had no choice." Ramsay Snow said. "Ramsay Bolton, he styles himself now," Daisy Mormont said, voice low and contemptuous. "He can call himself Dragonlord for all I care. It won't make him less of a bastard." Jon never took his eyes off the man. "Here's what happens," he said. "You wake each of these men. Quietly, you tell them the Starks are in Winterfell again. You tell them they have a choice. Lay hands on steel and die for a flayed man, or stand up barehanded and live under a wolf." He pressed the edge of Longclaw just enough to dimple the skin. "If anyone reaches for a weapon, Ghost will be faster. Do you understand?" The man's throat bobbed against the blade. He nodded, tiny, jerky. "Good," Jon said. He eased the sword back an inch. "Start with the one beside you." It was a tense, slow business. The young man moved from pallet to pallet, shaking shoulders, hissing warnings. Some men came awake swinging, hands twitching toward absent swords before their eyes focused and took in the steel at their throats. The direwolf in the shadows. Others blinked up, confusion giving way to fear and something like hope when they saw the gray direwolf sewn on northern cloaks behind Jon. "Stark?" one older man rasped. His beard was gray, his knuckles gnarled. "Robb Stark. King Robb," Daisy said. "He stands in the hall now." "7." The man breathed. His gaze dropped to the flayed man on his mail. His expression twisted. We thought," Bolton said. "There was no Stark left to come home to this place." "Now you know better," Jon said. "So choose. Quickly. There's fighting in the hall. You stand with us, you stand now. You stand against us, you won't stand long." One by one, men rose. Not all. A few muttered darkly of duty to their current lord, of oaths sworn, however reluctantly. One reached for a knife under his pillow. Ghost was on him in an instant, teeth closing on his wrist. He screamed, steel spilled from his fingers, blood pattering on the rushes. "Next man tries that," the Serwyn said, voice like ice. "I'll cut his hand off myself." In the end of the 20 and some in the barracks, a bare dozen chose to stand unarmed, hands raised. 5 muttered loyalty to Bolton and were bound. wrists lashed behind their backs. Two lay dead, one under Ghost's paws, the other felled by a Mormont sword when he'd lunged toward the door with a curse. Jon felt every choice like a stone in his pocket. Men lost, men gained. Wolves and flayed men and the thin line between. "Get them out into the yard," he said finally. "We'll sort them proper when the hall is ours. For now, keep the knives sheathed unless they push us." "And if they run?" Daisy asked. "Let them run," Jon said. "They carry the story of who holds these walls now." The great hall was a wounded beast. Char scars climbed the stone walls. Black claws raked up toward the rafters. The long trestle tables were mismatched now. A few of the old Winterfell boards, burn-scored but usable, interspersed with cruder replacements knocked together in haste. Tapestries that had once shown the history of House Stark. Wolves in snow, kings in fur-lined cloaks, the Grey King wrestling sea dragons, were gone. Some entirely burned, others stripped bare. In their place hung only damp-smoked stone and a few crude banners. The flayed man of House Bolton, hastily painted. A salt-stiffened kraken, drooping and dull. They looked wrong here like bloodstains on clean snow. At the high table where Eddard Stark had once sat, 3 men lounged with flagons in hand. 2 wore Bolton colors. The third's mail was bare, but his accent as he laughed at some joke marked him as Ironborn. A 4th slumped nearby on a bench, snoring loudly, his head tipped back, mouth open. "It's not so bad," one of the Boltons was saying. "Roof doesn't leak much. Plenty of wood left to burn. No Starks to tell us not to piss in the corners. The Boy King might come back," the Ironborn said, smirking. "Heard he lived through the twins. Hard bugger to kill." "Let him try," the Bolton man replied. "He'll find a warmer welcome on a flaying rack than at his own hearth." "That so?" a new voice said, came from the doors. The scorched planks crashed inward under Grey Wind's weight, the great wolf bursting through in a flurry of splinters and snarls. Behind him, framed in the ragged mouth of the entrance, Robb Stark strode in, sword bared, cloak flaring. The crown on his brow caught the firelight, throwing sharp glints. For a heartbeat, the hall froze. The Ironborn's flagon paused halfway to his mouth. The Bolton men swayed to their feet, hands scrambling for weapons not yet in reach. One knocked over a bench in his haste, the crash echoing off stone. "Robb Stark," the nearer Bolton rasped. "You're dead." "Not yet," Robb said, "but you will be if you don't throw down those blades." Grey Wind padded forward a pace, lips peeled back. Behind Robb, Tormund entered with a roar of laughter, axe over one shoulder, as if he'd just burst into a particularly rowdy inn. Howland Reed slipped in low along the wall, his men melting around him, bodies pressed to scant shadows. "Bold thing to say," the Ironborn sneered, though his eyes flicked nervously to Grey Wind. "You're one king with one wolf. We've more men than that." "Do you?" Tormund asked pleasantly. "Count again." As he spoke, crannogmen rose from behind the nearer tables, mud-painted faces appearing where only shadows had been a heartbeat before. Knives glinted in their hands. Additional figures filled the doorway. Northern soldiers, hard-faced, swords already out. The snoring man on the bench jerked awake, blinked, and beheld the scene. "Oh," he said somewhat stupidly. "Shit. Language," Tormund chided. The nearer Bolton man's hand closed on his sword hilt. For an instant Jon, had he been there, might have seen the choice play out behind his eyes. Yield and live as a prisoner in the halls he'd defiled. Draw and die with steel in hand. He drew. Grey Wind hit him before he'd half cleared the blade. The great wolf slammed into the man's chest, knocking him back into the high table. They went down in a tangle of limbs and splintered wood. The man screamed as teeth closed around his forearm, bone crunching. The second Bolton went for a knife at his belt. A crannogman's dart took him in the throat. He dropped, gurgling, clutching at the shaft. The Ironborn actually had the sense to throw his flagon instead of his blade. The metal cup clanged off Tormund's shoulder, ale splashing. The wildling blinked down at the wet patch on his furs. "Waste of good drink," he said, almost sadly, then hurled his axe. The Ironborn tried to duck. The axe took him in the shoulder instead of the head, spinning him sideways into the hearth. Sparks flew. "Anyone else?" Robb asked, voice taut. The last man standing. A sallow fellow with greasy hair, Bolton badge tarnished on his chest. Looked at the axe in the hearth, at Grey Wind's bloody jaws, at the knives ringing the hall. He dropped to his knees. "Mercy," he gasped. "I never Ramsay he." "Take him," Robb said. "We'll hear his tale in daylight. For now, bind him and toss him somewhere dark." Tormund hauled the man up by his collar, as easily as if lifting a child. "You're lucky the boy's in a generous mood," he told the prisoner. "If this were my hall, you'd be a story already." Robb stepped past them into the center of the hall. He turned slowly, taking in the scorched beams, the ruined tapestries, the flayed men hanging where his house's symbols had once been. His hand tightened on his sword. For a moment, Jon's dream of the twins flickered at the edges of this scene. The hall, the treachery, the blood. But this was different. Here, the wolf had come back. "Strip those banners," Robb said quietly. "Every flayed man, every kraken. Get them out. Burn them in the yard. Tonight." They brought the banners out into the yard as if they were bodies. There were more than Jon had realized. Bolton standards, some properly sewn, others crude copies painted on canvas. Ironborn flags torn from ships and hung here like trophies. Even a tattered Lannister lion, gods knew were stolen from. They formed a small, sullen heap in the center of the courtyard, colors dulled by grime and blood. Small folk began to emerge as the pile grew. At first, it was only a few faces. An old man in a threadbare cloak, clutching a younger woman's arm. A boy of 8 or 9, bareheaded in the cold, eyes enormous. A washerwoman with reddened hands, the hem of her dress ragged. They peered from doorways, from half-collapsed arches, from cellar steps, blinking at the sudden flurry of armed men in the yard. "Go on," a Mormont soldier said gruffly to one child, who had frozen in the shadow of the kitchens. "You'll catch your death on that stone. Come closer to the fire." Caitlin moved among them like a ghost from another life. Here, she laid a hand on a shoulder. There she exchanged a few murmured words. Faces lit with recognition, then disbelief, then something like hope so fragile it almost hurt to see. "Lady Stark," a baker's wife breathed, touching the hem of Caitlin's sleeve as if afraid she might vanish. "Is it truly?" "It is," Caitlin said. Her voice was rough, but steady. "My son is here. Your king is in his hall again." At the center of the yard, Tormund tossed a kraken banner onto the heap with an exaggerated flourish. "Ugly things," he said. "Bad luck to hang skins in a place you plan to sleep. They stink. They stink of treason," Robb said. Jon stepped forward with Ghost at his side. In his hands, he held the last of the flayed man banners. This one had hung above the hall's hearth, its fabric scorched at the edges, but the symbol still clear. Pale, flayed flesh on pink, bound to an X-shaped frame. He remembered it on Roose Bolton's breast, in the war tent, the day the man had pledged his sword to Robb. Remembered thinking it an ugly thing for an ally to wear. He held it up now, letting all in the yard see. "This," he said, voice carrying, "has no place here." He flung it onto the pile. A torch followed, tossed by Daisy Mormont. Fire licked at the cloth, hesitant at first, then eager as the dry, salt-stiffened fabric caught. Flames climbed, yellow and orange and vicious. The air filled with the crackle of burning cloth, the sharp stink of scorched dye. Small folk and soldiers alike watched in silence as the flayed men curled and blackened, as krakens shriveled, as the lone lion's mane crisped. Sparks lifted into the dark, carried by a small wind that had begun stirring from the north. Robb stood beside Jon, crown stark against the night. Grey Wind sat at his feet, eyes reflecting the fire. Ghost was a white blur at Jon's side, his own gaze fixed on the blaze. "Tomorrow," Robb said quietly, just for Jon's ears. "My banner goes up again. Over that gate, over this yard. Let the ravens carry that news to every corner of the realm." "And the flayed man?" Jon asked. Robb's jaw tightened. "Roose looks to me now," he said. "But I won't forget what his bastard did here, or what his men were willing to do for him." "Nor will these folk," Jon murmured. "They've lived under the flayed man. They won't forget the wolf that burned it, either." The fire burned brighter, sending its glow up along the blackened walls. For a moment, the scars looked less stark, softened by shifting light. Behind Jon, he could hear Tormund telling a small knot of villagers that where he came from, they burned the banners first and argued about who held the hall after. Several laughed, though the sound was shaky. Winterfell was not healed. It would not be, not quickly, perhaps not entirely. But tonight, at least, the right smoke rose from its yard. Later, when the banners were ash and the prisoners secured, when Robb had walked the walls and spoken words to reassure and to warn, Jon slipped away. His feet found the path to the godswood without thought. His body remembered every turn, every stone. The snow there lay deeper, undisturbed by the churn of soldiers' boots. The air was stiller, the sounds of the yard muted. Steam from the hot springs coiled between the trees, making the place seem at once more real and more dreamlike. The heart tree stood as it always had, pale bark ghost bright in the dark, branches spread wide, leaves like bloody hands against the snow. The carved face in its trunk looked down with the same inscrutable sorrow Jon remembered from boyhood. It had seen all of this, the burning, the flayed banners, the return. He knelt in the snow before it. Ghost settled at his side with a soft huff, folding into the drift, eyes half-lidded. The direwolf's warmth seeped into Jon's leg through the leather, a grounding tether. For a while, Jon said nothing. He watched the way the steam curled around the roots, the way individual flakes of snow caught the faint glow from his nearby torch as they fell. He listened to the distant murmur of voices from the castle, the clatter of a dropped pot, a dog's bark, the low rumble of a man's laugh. Normal sounds in an abnormal place. "Father," he said at last, feeling faintly foolish and entirely compelled. His voice sounded small under the towering boughs. "We're home, of a sort." The heart tree did not answer. The wind lifted a few red leaves. They whispered against one another. "We nearly lost Robb at the Twins," Jon went on. "He nearly lost all this. All for a marriage pact and an old man's spite. We stopped it, Tormund and I. The dream helped. Your gods or mine, I don't know whose gift it was." He exhaled, breath smoking. "I'd like to think you had a hand in it. You always said to keep my eyes open." Silence. Jon smiled ruefully at himself. "Ghost saved us as much as anything," he said. "He and Grey Wind. They were faster than any of us at hearing the wrong notes." He looked up, eyes tracing the weeping grooves of the carved eyes. "We've got more wolves now. Wildlings. Crannogmen. Men who don't swear to us by old oaths, but who'll stand when the dead come because there's nowhere else to run." His mind slid north, in the way dreams and thought did, to the vast white line of the wall, to Mance raiders' campfires, to pale shapes moving between black trees. "They're coming," he whispered. "You believed in them. You told us stories. The South thinks them tales. But you knew." A cold breeze sighed through the godswood, stirring the steam, ruffling Ghost's fur. The dire wolf lifted his head, ears pricked, as if hearing something Jon could not. "I don't know where I belong," Jon admitted to the tree. "Here, with Robb at his side with a wolf on my cloak, or up there on the wall with black on my shoulders and ice in my lungs. I broke my vows to save them, but I swore them to protect them in the first place. Feels like I'm walking a blade between." He closed his eyes. "I'll go north again," he said. "When Robb's settled here. When Winterfell breathes steady. I'll stand on the wall and look for the dead. I'll come back if I can. I'll keep going if I must. I just needed you to know that we're still fighting. That your sons aren't all lost. That the North remembers, even if the South forgets." Snow kissed his eyelashes, melt dampening his lashes. When he opened his eyes, the heart tree looked exactly as it had before. No sterner, no softer. Still, something in his chest eased. Ghost huffed once and lay his head on Jon's knee. Jon's hand dropped into the thick fur, fingers curling there. "We'll manage," he told the godswood. "One way or another, we'll manage." The leaves whispered overhead, their sound like the faintest murmur of a scent. Dawn seeped into Winterfell like water into dry earth. The first light was a thin, gray wash that gradually picked out edges, the jagged line of the broken tower, the low mist pooling over the yard, the faint glimmer of frost on the godswood's branches. Smoke from the banked fires rose straight up, no wind yet to bend it. In the solar that had once been Ned Stark's and had later housed Theon Greyjoy's brief, drunken reign, Robb stood at the narrow window, watching. The glass had cracked in places from heat. Shards were missing entirely. Cold air crept in. His breath fogged. On the desk behind him lay a map weighted with a knife, a few scrolls bearing broken black seals, the Raven's dispatches recovered from the rookery. One was from the Wall, another from White Harbor, a third, its script thin and precise, bore the hand of Roose Bolton. Jon stepped in quietly, ghost slipping past his legs to curl by the hearth, where a meager fire tried to warm stone. "You're up early," Jon said. "So are you," Robb replied without turning. "You always did like the cold." "I like the quiet," Jon said. "It doesn't last long in a full castle." Robb huffed a sound that might have been a laugh. "Full," he echoed. "Feels half empty now. Every step I take, I remember who's not here to hear it." Jon moved to stand beside him at the window. From here, they could see the yard where the banners had burned, now only a blackened patch of slush. The stables with steam curling from their vents. The open gate, where Robb had ordered the dire wolf of House Stark hung again, its gray cloth crisp and new against the old stone. "It's more full than it was," Jon said. "Yesterday there were flayed men here. Today there aren't. That's something." "Letters came in the night," Robb said. He gestured with his chin toward the desk. "Ravens have long wings." Jon glanced back. "The Wall." Robb said. "Jeor Mormont lives, though he writes less himself now. Much of this is in Maester Aemon's hand. Or Samwell Tarly's, by the blots." Relief loosened a knot Jon hadn't noticed in his chest. "Sam's alive. For now," Robb said. They held the fist as long as they could, then rode. Lost many, but they know now that the dead walk. They've seen them closer than any of us. They send men to man the castles long empty along the Wall, but there aren't enough. They say they'll take any we send that have the will to stand. Jon nodded slowly. "Good. They'll need every hand." "Roose has written too," Robb said. His voice cooled. "He congratulates me on retaking the twins, calls it a bold stroke, says he regrets not being there to lend his sword. He asks after Winterfell, wonders how badly his bastard had to damage the place to dislodge the Ironborn." Jon's jaw clenched. "He knows very well." "He does," Robb said, "but he's a careful man. He lays his words like snares." He looked down at the yard, where a handful of men were starting early drills, wooden swords clacking. "I need him for now. His men hold the Trident and the Dreadfort. If I move against him too soon, I'll split the North when we can least afford it." "You won't forget," Jon said, "even if you bide your time." "No," Robb agreed. His hand rose to touch the crown, fingers brushing the metal almost absently. "I won't forget what his bastard did here, or what his men would have done if we'd been a day later." He was quiet a moment. Then, without looking at Jon, he said, "You'll go back, to the Wall." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Jon said, "when I've done what I can here, when your place is secure. The Watch needs someone who's seen Mance's host and fought whites. I can't leave them blind." "And I can't keep you," Robb said, "much as I'd like to tie that dire wolf of yours to the gate and chain you inside." A faint smile ghosted his mouth. I'll need someone to speak for me up there. Someone they might listen to even if they're too stubborn to listen to ravens. I'll speak, Jon said, and shout if I must. And then, Robb asked, when the dead come in numbers, even the wall can't hold alone. When Mance pushes and the ice cracks and winter swallows half the north. Then we stand where we have to, Jon said simply. You at Winterfell, me on the wall, Tormund wherever the fighting's thickest. We'll make lines, and we'll bleed on them, and we'll hope it's enough. He glanced sideways at his brother. Kings don't get easy choices. Neither do bastards, it seems. Robb's hand dropped from his crown. He turned to face Jon fully. You'll be my man at the wall, he said. Not as some distant vassal, but as... He searched for the word. As my brother, as my voice. When you speak to the Watch, they'll know you speak for the king in the north. I'm a sworn brother of the Watch, Jon said. Or I was, or I am, still. He frowned. They won't like me speaking for any king. Then speak for the north, Robb said. Speak for Winterfell. Speak for father. You carry his face more than I do some days. A corner of his mouth lifted. I don't need a hand. I need a sword. You be that where I can't reach. Jon felt the weight of that settle on his shoulders, heavy and right. He nodded. I will. Robb reached and gripped his forearm. Jon gripped back. For a moment, they were boys in the yard again, swearing ridiculous pacts over stolen sweets. Then they were two men with wolves at their backs and winter at their throats, binding something that felt larger than either of them. Then it's done, Robb said. Word spread fast through the castle. The king would speak in the yard at midday, when the sun, not that any warmth came with it, reached its highest point, pale and wan behind a gauze of cloud. The yard was full. Soldiers in patched mail and fresh furs. Small folk in whatever they could find. Shawls, old cloaks, blankets pinned with bits of bone. Crannogmen stood near the back, close to the shadows, ready to disappear if needed. Wildlings jostled with umbers and mormonts, exchanging mutters and the occasional tentative jest. The dire wolf of House Stark flew over the gate again, newly raised, its gray cloth snapping crisply. If the stone beneath it was blackened, the banner itself was bright. Robb stood on the broken steps of the great hall, sword sheathed at his hip, crown on his brow. Grey Wind sat at his left, Ghost at Jon's right. Jon himself stood one step lower, just within reach. Tormund leaned on his axe nearby, teeth bared in something between a grin and a grimace. Howland Reed hovered near the edge of the gathering like a heron at a pond's lip. The murmur of the crowd washed up and down the yard until Robb lifted his hand. Slowly, the sound died. I stood here once as a boy, he said, voice carrying clear and strong. I watched my father speak to men from every corner of the north. I saw him pass judgment, grant boons, call banners. I thought it a grand game. His mouth twitched. Then I learned that every word he spoke here weighed more than all the practiced swords in the yard put together. A ripple of rueful amusement ran through the older Northmen. I come back to you not as the boy who rode south with more courage than sense, Robb went on, but as a man who's seen more death than I ever wished to. I've lost battles and won them. I've broken trust and tried to mend it. I've nearly lost my life in a hall that should have been a place of safety. His gaze swept the crowd. But I am here. We are here. In Winterfell. A low murmur. Some heads bowed slightly at the name. This castle has been burned and broken, Robb said. Its stones blackened by men who swore false. Its halls defiled by banners that have no right here. We've torn those banners down. We've reclaimed these walls. That is the beginning, not the end. He gestured toward the wall on the horizon with his sword hand, though it was long miles away. Beyond that line of ice, things move that do not belong in any man's world. The Night's Watch sends word. Dead men walking, white shadows that don't feel steel. Mance Rayder gathers every free soul he can find, not because he loves war, but because he fears what walks behind him more than he hates what stands before him. Some in the yard shifted uneasily. Others stiffened, hearing their own fears given shape. For years, we've fought lions and krakens and our own kin, Robb said. We've spilled northern blood in southern fields. We've broken packs and made new ones. No more. His voice hardened. The North will still answer when wronged. We will still defend what is ours. But we will not waste the sons and daughters of winter on petty squabbles while the dead mass at our door. Tormund snorted approvingly. Petty squabbles he calls your lion kings, he muttered. I like him. Robb lifted his sword then, the steel catching what little light there was. Here's my word, he said. Winterfell stands. The North stands. We'll mend these walls. We'll plant these fields. We'll bring food and fire to those who need it. We'll make peace where we can, with free folk who'll stand a line, with southern lords who remember their oaths. And when the time comes, we'll march north together. We'll stand on the wall and beyond it, shoulder to shoulder. Northmen, free folk, crannogmen, any man or woman who'll raise a spear against the dark. He lowered the sword, its tip resting lightly on the stone. If you'll have me still as your king, he said quietly, I'll stand that line with you. If you won't, say so now, and we'll know who prefers flayed men and lions to wolves. For a heartbeat, the yard was silent. Then the great Jon stepped forward, boots crunching in the snow. He drew his own sword and slammed it point down into the earth. The king in the north, he roared. Robb Stark, the king in the north. Echoed Mormont voices, deep and fierce. The king in the north, cried others, Serwyns, Hornwoods, Ryswells, men who had once doubted and still might, but whose blood remembered a Stark in Winterfell. The shout rose, swelling, rolling over the yard like thunder. Even some wildlings took it up, the words strange in their mouths but the sentiment familiar. A war leader who'd stand where the fighting was worst. Jon did not shout. He stood beside Robb, heart hammering, listening as the name and title beat at the sky. The last time he'd heard those words, it had been in a forest camp, in the first flush of victory. Now they sounded different, less like a battle cry, more like a vow. Robb glanced sideways at him, eyes very bright. Jon inclined his head, saying without words what he did not voice aloud. I stand here, for now. Soon he knew his feet would turn north. But for this moment, in this yard, with Ghost at his side and Winterfell's stone under his boots, Jon Snow allowed himself to feel, just once, what it was to be part of something whole. Later, when the shouting had faded and the fires banked low, Jon found himself on the outer wall. The snow had thickened, flakes drifting down in fat, slow spirals, catching in his hair and on his lashes. The yard below was a patchwork of dimly glowing coals, like embers in a giant's pipe. The godswood was a darker smudge, punctuated by the pale trunk of the heart tree. Beyond the walls, the land fell away into darkness, the King's Road a ghostly line under the fresh fall. North of here, beyond forests and hills and the long, bare stretch of the New Gift, the wall rose. Jon could not see it, but he felt it. A line in his mind, a presence cold and implacable. Your stone here feels different from the wall, Tormund observed, leaning on the parapet. His beard was full of snow, less like it wants to kill a man for climbing it. The wall doesn't want anything, Jon said. It just is. That's what I mean, Tormund replied. Big, blank, unbothered thing. This place, he nodded to Winterfell behind them. It remembers. You can feel it, like old bones under new skin. Jon thought of the hot springs, of the way the castle's warmth came from deep within, from the earth's own heart. He said, it does. Ghost paced along the wall walk ahead, now a white smear against the snow-silvered stone. A pair of wildling scouts huddled near a torch, trading low remarks about how strange it was to stand on a tower and not be aiming at someone's head. Mance will move, Tormund said after a while. His breath came out in plumes. Soon, if winter keeps creeping, he can't sit forever with his folk freezing and his enemies on both sides. I know, Jon said. That's why I have to go. Tormund eyed him. Not tempted to stay? Big castle. Warm floors. Folk shouting your brother's name. Some of them probably thinking he should have been you. That's not how Starks think, Jon said. Or how I do. Maybe, Tormund said. But I've seen how men look at you. They see a wolf with a different cloak. Doesn't matter. You're too much like me to sit long in one place. Jon let that pass. Robb needs someone here who knows what's coming from beyond the wall, he said. But he needs more here who know the north. I'm better used where the dead will first strike. Tormund grunted. We'll be there, he said. When the time comes, you send word, we'll come. Not because your king tells us to, because I gave you my word. And because I don't fancy freezing my balls off in a tent while blue-eyed corpses stomp around outside. A smile tugged at Jon's mouth. We'll hold you to that. He looked north again, squinting as if he might pierce the dark and see the wall's white bulk. In his mind's eye, he saw those fires again. Mance's camp, ringed by shadows that did not belong to the living. He felt the weight of the raven's wings as it had flown in his dream, bearing Robb's sealed words. We've changed things, he said quietly. Stopped one slaughter, saved Winterfell, put a different knife in Walder Frey's hand, one pointing at him instead of at us. It might not be enough, but it's something. Can't ask for more from men, Tormund said. We're not gods. We piss in the snow and hope it makes a difference. Jon snorted. That's one way to put it. It's the only way, Tormund said. He pushed away from the parapet, stretching. I'm for my furs. One of your northern maids says she's curious what's under all this. He gestured at himself. And I'm a generous man. Jon shook his head. Spare me the details. Never, Tormund said cheerfully, and stomped off, his laughter trailing behind him. Jon stayed a little longer, letting the snow settle on his shoulders, letting the cold numb his exposed skin. Ghost came to lean against his leg, heavy and real. Soon, Jon murmured. One more night here, maybe two, then we ride. Ghost's tail swept once along the stones. The world before them was dark, but it was no longer unknowable. Between Winterfell and the wall, men were waking to the truth. That had to count for something. When the time came to leave, it came quietly. There were no great speeches in the yard, no feasts. Winterfell was still too raw for that. Men were busy the night before repairing roofs, shoring up walls, moving families into less damaged rooms. The smell of fresh-cut wood and mortar had begun to overlay the old sense of smoke. At dawn, the gate stood open, a white hush lying over the world beyond. Snow fell in fine grains, more like salt than feathers, dusting cloaks and fur-lined hoods. Jon sat his horse just inside the arch, Ghost at his stirrup. The direwolf's fur was already speckled with white, making him look half-carved from the weather itself. Tormund waited on a shaggy mount nearby, Era on a smaller, quick-eyed mare. Behind them, a handful of northern rangers. Men who knew the road to the wall as well as Jon did checked girths and packs. Robb stood on the steps above, gray wind at his side, cloak pulled tight. The crown glinted faintly under its rim of snow. Cailin was beside him, cloak pinned with the Tully trout. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. You could still change your mind, Robb said. It wasn't a real invitation, not really. They both knew that. It was a courtesy between brothers. So could you, Jon replied. You could ride with me. Leave this mess to someone else. Robb's mouth quirked. Tempting, he said, but I think I'll stay. Someone needs to make sure this lot don't eat all the winter stores before spring. They clasped forearms again, the grip tighter than before, as if both feared some unseen thing might come between if they let go too quickly. Send ravens, Robb said, often, even if they carry no more than curses at the cold. You first, Jon said. Tell me when Bolton smiles wrong, when Mance moves, when the South sends new kings with old crowns. Cailin came down a step, moving closer. For a heartbeat, Jon thought she might say nothing at all. She had never quite known what to do with him. Bastard son of the man she'd loved and the woman she'd never known. Now, she reached out and touched his sleeve. "Keep him alive," she said quietly, jerking her chin toward Robb. "Up there, as best you can. If you send word of danger, I'll drag half the north after him myself if he tries to stay behind." Jon nodded. "I will," he said, "and I'll keep myself alive if I can, for whatever that's worth." Her mouth twitched. "It's worth more than I once thought," she said. "The gods help me." She stepped back. The path was clear. Tormund gave Jon a thump on the shoulder. "Come on, Crow," he said. "Let's go see if your wall is still standing. I've more stories to carve into its ice." Era checked the fletching on a bundle of arrows. "And more dead things to stick," she added. Jon looked back at Winterfell one last time. The walls still bore their scars, but smoke rose now from the great hall in a steady plume. Men's voices drifted faintly from the yard, the clack of wood against wood as someone barked a training command. The heart tree's tallest branches just cleared the curtain wall in the distance, red leaves stark against the white. Home, he thought. For them. For me, for now. He turned his horse's head north. Ghost loped ahead, sure-footed in the snow. The small column formed behind him, Tormund humming some half-remembered tune, the rangers settling into the long, steady pace of men who knew there were many miles yet to go. As they passed beneath the direwolf banner, it cracked in a small gust, the stitched wolf seeming, for an instant, to lift its head to the sky. The road to the wall lay white and waiting. Beyond it, Mance's fires burned in the dusk of another world, and pale shapes moved in woods where no man should walk alone. But between those fires and these walls, there was now more than stone. There were men who knew what awaited them. Wolves in fur and leather, in wildling skins and crannog mud, under crowns and under none. Jon Snow rode north with a direwolf at his side and a king's trust on his shoulders, toward the line where stories ended and the real war would begin. For the wall, for Winterfell, and for the realms of men that both had sworn, in different ways, to protect.